All right, so welcome back to the third part of this presentation. And in this third part, I will be synthesizing the first two parts in terms of their content and trying to give you some more very specific examples from the actual data. Now, before I go into the data, I want to take a moment and talk about the empirical analysis that I used in this empirical analysis methods used in this research project. So first, of course, because I was using a post-humanist literature and I was paying attention not only to human experiences, but also the experiences that humans make in relation with the spaces, the places they're in, or the objects that they use, or the relations that emerge from specific events and their feelings attached to these events. This body of work actually includes a lot of materialist thinking. And to evaluate the merits and applicability of this kind of literature, this theoretical approach of materialist ontologies and ontological politics, which is part of it, but I will not be talking about this today. Through the example of recovery, I had to pay attention to at least two aspects. The first one was the theoretical thinking that is deliberately foregrounded in this analysis to demonstrate the uses of these approaches for the concept of recovery. Because in a PhD project, my intention was to address a very specific niche of recovery research available. And by using data from the two countries, I had an opportunity to look into the kind of experiences and specificities of situations that are not very often represented in the Western literature. Or in the ways we understand the word recovery in English, for example. And when you translate that word into Azerbaijani or Russian or German, not only the meaning changes, and not only there is no exact translation of the word recovery, but also its implications change. And taking this theoretical approach of relationality and socio-materiality actually help to sort of reconstruct the meaning of recovery in English by using the experiences from other languages. Now, I didn't mention this before, but I collected the data for this project in 4 different languages. That was in Azerbaijani, in Russian, in English, and in German. And in all these languages, the experiences of recovery have been narrated in a very different manner. So by using the specific theoretical model that I used, actually helped me a lot to overcome these sort of differences as a challenge, and instead focus on how they inform the understanding of recovery in English language. And the second aspect in this evaluation was the conceptually crafted intervention. It is more critical and more careful ways of knowing. Now, what does this mean in this particular case is that when we use specific combination of methodological approaches, and theoretical approaches, we are also in the position to craft, that is to fashion or to create a specific intervention in our thinking. So it informs the way we think about specific phenomena. But I will leave this there, and I will not go too much into details on this aspect. But I wanted to mention this because this was an important part of this research project. And if some of you are interested, we can discuss this or exchange opinions and literature in the summer school time. And The second aspect of the empirical analysis was the context of the comparison, right? Because as I said earlier, the two countries are very different across a number of dimensions. And it was important for me to look and see the instability and contingency, that is the complexity of recovery contexts. So instead of thinking or taking a linear approach, my perspective was to go and look into the very nuanced and very often neglected aspects of day-to-day lives of humans and their experiences. And in this sort of mission, take a look beyond the Anglophone and continental thinking about recovery. Now, for me, this was the most sort of challenging and at the same time rewarding experience of doing research where I could have access to data from two countries and choose a methodological perspective to compare them. So I think this is especially important for the context of the SOLID project. And within the summer school, you are provided by numerous lectures from different countries. And a comparison, a sort of qualitative comparison of lectures from Central Asia and Public Republic of China to sort of the ideas and drug discourses in Germany, for example, or other European countries is actually something that we want to expand and reflect upon during the coming years of this project, and to offer a different way of understanding such very Anglophone or Anglo-American terms such as recovery. What would happen, or how would we understand if we would study recovery in China, for example, with these particular methodological approaches, and what kind of results and meanings would emerge in the context of recovery within, for example, Chinese drug treatment center. So these are just sort of, spitballing some general ideas about how we can talk and why theoretical perspectives are important, even though we're doing a sort of very specific practice-oriented, social work-oriented research. So in the next slide, I want to talk about the three pillars of the empirical analysis. And the first one was, of course, to look into the young people's own interpretation of their recovery and what it means to them. Often, for example, in the literature, recovery means feeling better, getting better, or becoming healthy. And sort of overcoming one's habits of continuous drug use, or if you want to call it addiction. And some users do. Some users call their experiences addiction. And in this case, coming over this addiction means, understanding better one's own well-being. So my question in this research was, who deserves the state's care, particularly in the context of Azerbaijan? The second question was to understand, what does it mean to recover in an abstinence-oriented policy environment? Now, I talked about this in the first part of my presentation, what an abstinence-oriented policy means. Remember the zero tolerance idea and how it relates to what kind of treatments are available, what kind of care does the state provide to these young people. And finally, the third question was politics of denial. This is very specific for the case of Azerbaijan and not for the case of Germany. But the politics of denial, if you look into the literature in social sciences and sociology about the post-Soviet region and the state politics about the health and well-being, and stigmatized or so-called social diseases, such as drug use, addiction is one of them. We can talk about the politics of denial as one of the sort of legacies that most post-Soviet countries inherited from the Soviet Russian regime. So, how does national drug discourse under the politics of denial compromises individual needs for the sake of communal stability? This is of special importance for countries where social work, for example, and the understanding of social services have always been a role of the families and communities and not of the state. One aspect that stands very clear is that while German side provides a lot of nuanced, multidimensional, and complex care systems for young people who need drug treatment, in Azerbaijan, the problem of drug treatment is often cases denied because the understanding of the national discourse, to put it in simple words, means or interprets in a way that if we provide multidimensional care for young people or for anybody who uses drugs, excuse me, we will be promoting the possibility of drug use, and this kind of contradictory or controversial promotional effect is one of the barriers in the improvement of drug policy, not only in Azerbaijan but in general in the development of drug policy discourse across the world. So through these three pillars, and there are a number of questions and experiences that I want to share with you. Just coming back to the question of who deserves the state's care, I want to share with you an interview quote from Timur, which is a pseudonym, who was 18 years old and just 3 days into the detox clinic when I started interviewing him. And Timur says, he's in the withdrawal process. He has begun receiving painkillers and, injections and dissolution bags and all. And he says, those pills, I cannot take them at home. I can take them at home too. If 10 of those Contramol tablets of 50 milligram were not helping me to cease my pain, would just 2 do? The nurse asks me how I know this. Of course I know, because I do these things. I know those pills. This is not why I came to the hospital. If this is the treatment, then I can do that at home too. Now, in this particular case, Timur had a very low quality of treatment offered to him at the drug treatment center. He was staying at an unpaid ward, which means that the wards are divided between state-funded wards and the wards that are paid by the clients themselves. If the clients pay additional fees, then the quality of care is usually higher. But Timur, and this was already his 3rd time in this drug treatment center, now this time was staying in a very poorly equipped sort of ward or department of the treatment center, and he didn't have access to a lot of the services and most of the good care that he used to receive before in the previous times when he attended the treatment center. And he's here comparing very clearly the idea of treatment. And interesting is that Contramol, or sometimes Tramadol, are the painkiller tablets that young people in Azerbaijan can easily purchase from some of the state-funded pharmacies or state pharmacies and misuse or sort of use these drugs for non-medical purposes, for just feeling high, for feeling the ecstasy, the good feelings, so to say, associated with this particular drug. And It is an opioid, and it's a very effective and strong painkiller. And some of the young people come to the drug treatment center because they have been using tramadol for a long time, and their body is no longer able to digest the drug. And in this case, they come to the treatment center and they receive the same drug, the same pharmaceutical drug for the treatment of their withdrawal symptoms. And this is what Timur here shows us. In relation to our second question, where I talked about the recovering in an abstinence-oriented policy environment, there's a quote from Ahad, also a pseudonym. All of the names have been changed. He was also 18 years old. And he says the following. He says, I started injecting, and in November, my family left me here. Then they took me out after the detox, but I wasn't able to stop. Then again in February, they brought me back in here. And the same things happen again. I left it here and relapsed the same day. Now I'm back here since February. They told me to stay for another month, but I cannot stop. I came for treatment 3 times in 1 year, but I am unable to quit it, no matter how hard I try. The reason why I chose this quote is because Ahad here is telling us how the detox treatment is expected to be the only solution to withdrawal and to drug use in general. And because he's not able to stop using drugs after this very short-term detox, he's blaming himself over and over again for coming to this drug treatment center repeatedly and never being able to actually quit using the drugs. In the third sort of analytical strategy and the question, I talked about the politics of denial in most of the post-Soviet states when it comes to the health policies. And here's a quote from Firuza, who is also 18 years old, who also stayed at the drug treatment center in Baku. And she spoke about her experiences of attending the treatment that is specifically designed to be repellent and to leave sort of difficult, sometimes horrifying memories in young people's experiences, so that they are frightened away from using drugs and eventually ending up in drug treatment. Firuza here says, I stayed in this place for 21 days, and to be honest, these were the worst 21 days of my life. Not that they treat you here badly, but people here are very different. When I see that there are people who are even worse than I am, a woman died here in front of my eyes. I was sleeping next to her almost. This isn't very cool. All these girls who have done much worse things than I have, and they talk about it all. Then all these injections with intravenous solution bags, every day the same thing, and you just want to get out of here. You think to yourself that it would have been better if I hadn't started all this in the first place. When I think that I could come back here if I relapse, and maybe spend here even more time, I just try not to break loose and take something. And this is precisely the idea of the notion of stigmatization within the treatment, and the context of the treatment and how it's provided, how it's enacted, and what it means to young people to spend 21 days in this drug treatment center, what kind of feelings and affects it leaves them with. And this quote from Firuza is a great example of that. Finally, I want to conclude with thoughts about the central issues in drug treatment strategies. In general, we know that most of the drug treatment is the psychosocial, the counseling aspect of it is to cultivate, specifically has been a part of, for example, also self-help fellowships, not just a formal treatment, is to cultivate the addict identity. the identity of a person who is unable to control their drug use, and they have to be governed and be controlled. And their lives need to be intervened in order to create some order out of the chaotic, so to say, chaotic in quotations, lifestyles of these people. And the literature in recovery studies and in general in critical drug studies have already numerous times scrutinized that the formal policies, as well as often self-help fellowships and the whole idea of recovery, is very often working to create the identity of an addicted person who always needs to have control over their desires and have a strong willpower. The second central issue in drug treatment strategies, and this is particularly the case for Azerbaijan, is that majority of young people, unless they are forced via law enforcement agencies or their families or caretakers, would prefer quitting on their own in sort of natural conditions than attending a detoxification program in the National Drug Center. And I think this does not require any more interpretation because we have just heard the quotes from the young people. And the final aspect here is an explicit hierarchy in the ways these difficulties that young people experience during treatment occur and the sense of protection and security that they lack. Very often, in specific in case of Azerbaijan, young people told in their interviews that they feel obliged to deliver this complete abstinence, being able to quit after a very short detox and deliver sort of these results of being cured, having been recovered, and simultaneously not being able to do that. And when they are not able to deliver that, there is no support from the sort of system, the system of care from the state in order to enable the continuation of their treatment and work through the stages of their recovery that they might have been going on or going through. Finally, I want to finish with some of the practical implications of doing this kind of research. Now, remember, I do have some of the theoretical aspects that I didn't have time or sort of the context to deliver or to talk about in this particular presentation, but I have included some of them in the practical implications for better possibility of a better treatment and better recovery programs in Azerbaijan. And I think one of them is we have to start with understanding that helping to create a context for an uninterrupted rhythm of healthier but still pleasurable activities is very important for young people, so that it doesn't abruptly end at the end of the detox, but that there is a continuation of their treatment where they're not punished, they're not expelled, or they're not judged for not being able to be cured from the detox treatment, but to be able to still have some pleasure and experience the pleasure within their drug use while they also attempt to feel better or to recover. This also means that we do not need to sharply distinguish drug use from recovery and consider the idea that the two can actually be interrelated and co-constitute each other. The second practical implication could be reducing the standardized and often very bureaucratic practices within treatment systems. We can discuss this later during the discussion in summer school. The third aspect would be considering the variety of interests of young people and allowing flexibility of services to be spontaneously designed for specific individual benefits. And finally, this is about sort of the scientific and research aspect of it, is that enable, fund, and support more research that would focus on the spatial material, and effective aspects of the experiences. Because by looking into these aspects, we're able to put together more nuanced and more contingent and more culturally sensitive and easily adaptable programs for recovery. I will stop here for the presentation part, and I hope that you were able to think together with me, and I really look forward for your questions and to the summer school. Thank you.